Welcome back. We're talking about the just concluded election in Germany. Let's get back to our panel right now. And Jackson, I want to get to you. If we look a little bit more deeply into why Germans voted the way they did, we had this comment from Clemens First, who is the director of the Institute for Economic Research in Munich. And he said the results showed wide concern over, quote, security, immigration, and possible challenges to the German economic model like globalization. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the mix in there. That last point has to do with the fact that a lot of people are a little bit concerned about whether the current market of Germany's powerful export is going to be able to stay in place. I think that basically there's going to be an issue here of what they call the digitalization revolution, and a lot of people are afraid that the manufacturing base that Germany has relied on for so long is not going to hold up. And so I think there is that mix of the issues that you just described, but I think that economic dimension is also very important when it comes to people's concerns.
Timo, there was also this explanation, and this came from Hans Kundani, who was also with the German Marshall Fund. He said that the big election shock was not the gains of the AfD, but the loss of support for Merkel's conservatives and the increasing, what he called, fragmentation of German political life. Does he have a point in there?
Yes, I think, well, Hans has a fair point here. Of course, the CDU-CSU lost 8%. However, we should not forget the CDU-CSU still received 33% after two historical crises in post-war Germany, the Euro crisis and the refugee crisis. And the mere vote share, 33%, is a figure all other European countries wish to get. In other proportional representation systems, which excludes France and the UK in Europe, all other big parties obtain way fewer votes, which means, yes, Angela Merkel's CDU-CSU, they took a hit. However, they are still a remarkably stable, extremely strong center party in Europe, and they governed Germany and Europe throughout a very, very difficult, daring time. So yes, Hans has a point here. This was a hit for the CDU-CSU, but given the policy changes this government had to cope with, it is rather remarkable that the CDU-CSU only lost 8%, and that, very important, aside from the far left and the far right, 75%, which is 3 out of 4 German voters, voted for moderate, centrist, pro-European parties, which is a vote share you can hardly find anywhere else in Western Europe, in favor of a pro-European liberal policy.
What do you make of that, Ansgar? Yes, 3 out of 4 voted for moderate centrist parties, but how does one explain the other 1 in 4 that voted for extreme right parties?
Yeah, I would totally agree with my colleague. I think one problem is that Angela Merkel switched the course of the party over the last few years from centrist right to centrist centrist. Therefore, there has been a moderate right wing from the CDU, or at the CDU, a party wing with prominent figures, and this wing was neglected over the last years, and therefore there was space to the right of the CDU or of the Union, and because this space was left free, there was a vacuum, and there was the possibility for the AfD to establish this new party, and so I think Merkel should have learned from yesterday that her People Party, the CDU, has to have a center in the center, but it has next to a left wing also a conservative or moderate right wing. If that would happen again, if that would be established, she could deal with AfD, I think.
Ansgar, if we look at the result,
and regain voters from AfD.
Okay, if we look at the result in Germany very broadly, are we seeing that result a reflection of a broader trend in Europe? We've seen these kinds of results in Denmark, in France, and to some extent in the United States as well.
Yeah, I think we live in a period of mass migration. It's not just a short-time result maybe of the Syrian war or so. We live in a period of people's mass migration. It's coming from Africa and from the Middle East, heading for Europe. There are some reasons for that. In Europe, we have a very low, much too low birth rate. In Africa, we have a very high birth rate, and therefore the masses are heading for Europe, and we have to deal with that. It happens several times throughout our history. But if it comes, and it came, and everybody saw it coming in 2015, people are concerned, people are threatened or feel threatened, and parties have to, and politicians have to find a way to deal with this new situation of mass migration.
Right. Jackson, Angela Merkel has already said that she will not allow the AfD, despite their gains, to influence the country's foreign, European and refugee policies. But if she wants to win back those votes, are we going to see a retooling of Angela Merkel's policies in this new reality that Germany faces?
Well, I think what she did after the 2015 wave came through was to recalibrate a bit then and go back and look at the border control systems, and there will certainly be more focus on that, especially if in a cabinet change you're going to see some more conservative focus on that, represented primarily by the CSU, which had been touting that particular line for some time. But I think at the same time there's a larger issue here, and that is that Germany as a society, as I said before, is going to have to go through some real changes in terms of understanding what its identity is and what its mixture of society is going to look like in the next 15 to 20 years. And that is playing a game of catch-up. It's going to happen one way or the other, and the parties are going to have to figure out how to have a narrative about that. And one of the things that I think that Timo is much better on this than I am is that the parties themselves are having to recalibrate their entire brand. They're basically, some of them, in the case of the SPD and I think the CDU as well, they coasted a bit on what they thought was their constituencies. And what they're finding is there's a lot more fluidity across all party spectrums in what constitutes the constituencies that they are supposed to be addressing. That's true across the board in Europe. It's true in the United States. Mr. Trump basically took over a Republican Party and is transforming it. And I think that's what's happening. A lot of parties are trying to play catch-up with the kind of constituencies that they're chasing, and they have to come up with a better message to maintain their attention, and they're not doing all that well.
All right, Timo, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a big rethink going on among Germany's big parties now, what they stand for, in view of the fact that the electorate is looking for very different things?
I think Jackson has a very fair point here. And what you currently observe in Germany is that hardly anyone wants to join the government. So the Democrats don't want to, the Greens were surprised and are still a bit reluctant, and the Liberals don't want to govern either. And even the CSU, the conservative wing and the Conservative Party, are reluctant to appreciate the chance to form a government. Why? Because exactly as Jackson said, they need to kind of dive into the data, into the figures, and figure out what the heck is happening in Germany in the last years. They lose their constituencies with the messages that worked fairly well for 2 decades. And the reason being that Germany used to be defined by stark polarization over economic matters in the 90s and the 2000s. So basically parties needed a strong economic message. Then in the last 10 years of Angela Merkel's tutelage, messages, emotions were almost entirely absent from the German debate. And now, with the rise of the refugee issue and with the rise of the far right, you now have a new issue. It's not economics, it's migrants and Eurozone topics which the parties have to forge a message on. And on top of that, that message needs to be extremely emotional because the AfD is gaining votes with emotionalized messages. So basically, Jackson is right. All German parties now need to rethink how they have to adopt and maybe entirely revamp their messaging away from rational arguments, away from economics, changing towards a platform which is extremely apt on communicating emotionalized identity issues like migration, Eurozone topics, and foreign policy. So we are currently in the beginning of a learning process of the established German parties.
Ansgar, there was a recent poll which was published by the Gallup organization which showed that Chancellor Angela Merkel personally is very popular among Germans. She enjoys a 68% popularity rating. How is she not able to translate her personal popularity into a win for her party?
She's popular, she is well liked, but a lot of people lost the trust in her because of this 2015 issue with the control of the borders, or the not controlling the borders. I think this lack of trust is one point. The other point, Angela Merkel is in power since 2003. That's a very long time, and people are a little bit exhausted by these long years of Merkel, but there is no alternative at this moment. Therefore, I think after those many years to get 30 or 32%, it's not too bad, but the CDU and the CSU have to figure out a way to modernize not only its politics, and they have to be a little bit more conservative, more in going into the direction of control and of border safety and so on. But they also have to find a way to present new faces, new opinions, new images for the electorate.
Okay, gentlemen, that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.